Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Good stuff. So yes, Brown's Bigger Byte. So for those that don't know me, my name's Andy Brown. I'm the product director now at Kocho. I came across with Shane from the Mobility acquisition just over a year ago, where I was the CTO over there. So I'm now looking after our go-to-market, our product strategy, and also looking after some of the technical pre-sales side of our business. But obviously, like the rest of you, I've turned down Rishi to come to this event instead. Bletchley Park was just too far out of London. So thank you everyone for making time to join me. So in terms of what I'll be talking about, clearly there's quite a lot in here in terms of the year, I suppose. So, 2023 has just been a pretty phenomenal one for in terms of the year of mobile endpoint, world of security. So I'll do a quick recap there. One of the big shifts in the market, even no prizes for working out what that is, clearly how the Microsoft vision and how that overlays and how they're increasingly placing themselves at the heart of IT strategy. We'll talk a little bit on that. Quick summary and Q&A. So I guess it is just under a year ago, or just over a year ago, I think, since we last held View. So yeah, September 2022. Wow, quite a lot has changed in the market. So ignoring what's going on in technology space for a minute, that the world has had a pretty interesting year, shall we say, and it's been an interesting year, therefore, into business as well. We've had, obviously, major geopolitical events going on in the background, financial markets being pretty spooked as a result. We've had interest rate rises, we've had energy price rises, all kinds of things have happened in the last year. And all of that feeds into business strategy. And business strategy is ultimately driving IT strategy, clearly. And what we've seen is, to a certain extent, sometimes, let's try and, do we have to do this now? Which is an interesting conversation to have, especially in the security space, because clearly it's a balance of spend versus risk. Projects potentially deferred. But increasingly what we have also seen is let's take stock and look at what we've got and actually drive value from that. And this is one of the wonderful things that's happened from the Microsoft licensing ecosystem, is the fact that generally most people in this room will have bought some level of bundle licensing from Microsoft. And in particular, when you're up at the E5 level, which a lot of you will be, there's a lot of value in there that you can drive into the business. And clearly some of that is through displacement of overlapping or competing technologies, but clearly there's also real business change and the ability to drive value for the business in there as well. We've seen in certain sectors a real challenge when it comes to just bandwidth as well. So in business, there's global statistics about a shortage worldwide in terms of security analysts, the ability to actually have enough eyes on glass to try and deal with the threat as it's growing out there. We're seeing sometimes the ability to cross-train, reskill on modern technology stacks creates its own bandwidth issues. And again, this is something that we're helping customers with. And just general bandwidth. There's so much going on now that for a lot of organizations, this is something that they have to try and keep resourced effectively. And again, something we can help with. So if I dig into the technology space a little bit, what we're seeing, I guess, in the world, mobile and endpoint space. So the first is Apple. They're the dominant player in the mobile space. iOS 17 obviously landed, what's it now, a couple of months ago, and the latest iPhone 15. It's really been quite an iterative release from Apple. But that doesn't stop the juggernaut. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, I think is probably a good summary of where we're at with the latest generation of iPhone. iOS 17 itself is proving itself to be a pretty stable release out there. We're generally getting good, solid feedback from customers. They've had a few wobbles along the way, but generally pretty good. Where they are now starting to have to focus more and more effort is around security of the operating system itself. The Apple ecosystem is inherently well engineered, don't get me wrong, but fundamentally it's now under attack like never before, because fundamentally there are so many of these endpoints out there. It's no surprise to see bad actors going after it. Android, and this is the most ridiculously named operating system in the world, so we've got the latest flavor of Android, upside down cake. This is a pretty niche smartphone in the enterprise sector, interestingly enough. Where we see it is normally for two reasons. Well, three maybe. So we're talking about low end in terms of you can get a significantly cheaper, effective smartphone. We see power users, so people in particular who are passionate about their mobiles or want different form factors or want to be able to configure it to the nth degree. They will be Android users by default, and they will want to bring their own device to work as well. The other area clearly is embedded. Android is increasingly the operating system that is either embedded or is used in ruggedized devices, point of sale terminals, whatever it may be. So the proliferation of Android endpoints is happening whether you're choosing them as your smartphone strategy or not. Classic case being helping a customer with their Teams room equipment because it's an Android device underneath, which brings all of the various challenges that sometimes come from that fragmented ecosystem. Interestingly enough, I've been banging on for years. If you've been listening to me for a long, long time, I've always been banging on about Android's Achilles heel has been the fact that they just don't patch it for long enough. If you buy a device, it needs to contain security updates for the time you want to use that device. We're now reaching the point where the latest Pixel devices coming from Google, they're talking about 7 years of updates. They're actually potentially nudging ahead of Apple, if they keep their promises on that. But it's a real step change. I think there's finally an acknowledgement that that needs to be sorted. And then the biggie that we're doing a lot of work with customers around in the endpoint space is Windows 11. So the ability to, most people have obviously got a Windows 10 estate, potentially bleeding across into a Windows 11 estate. But for a lot of organizations, Windows 11 is actually a chance to really start to modernize the endpoint estate, the ability to switch to a more modern management approach, treat it more like the mobile endpoint. Again, things I've been saying for a long, long time. We're generally now seeing that adoption really accelerate in the market. I always talk about macOS. The fact that Apple held their event the other day, latest generation of M3 chipsets, they're still stealing a march on the hardware side for the time being. But quite frankly, no one seems to care. The general rule is it's a Windows ecosystem in enterprise. We see pockets of Mac. But this is an area of focus for Apple. But they are looking to drive the growth of their endpoint estate, and they'll be looking at the enterprise market as something to target because clearly they buy a lot of laptops. In terms of identity and security, I mean, it's now reached the point, again, something we've said for a while, but identity is actually the foundation stone, the core pillar of your IT security strategy. Having the ability to have single sign-on and passwordless, potentially, access to all of your various services is now core to doing security effectively. But also what we're now starting to see is an increasing awareness and an increasing need to ensure that access is appropriate at all times and monitored and maintained and policed effectively. Governance is key. Once identity is the front door to your environment, clearly you've got to make sure it's appropriate at all times. Lots of work going on there and real shifts in the market as well in terms of the ability to start to use verified ID, the ability for you to issue IDs to your internal users or even customers, and the ability for them to use them appropriately across all kinds of services. This is a real area of growth, and it's just going to continue. I talk a lot about attack surfaces, and I think we're now in an interesting point where, for a lot of organizations, they're in a hybrid state. We've got a mixture of on-prem, private cloud, some public cloud, Azure, potentially multi-cloud in the background. All of those various flavors of technology ultimately are an attack surface. And the ability to maintain and monitor on top of all of that is getting harder and harder. It's inevitable that as you increase the number of systems that you have deployed, clearly the number of attack points increases over time as well. So this is an area that I think is going to be a core one going forwards as we go into next year, because there's no doubt that simplification is a key area in this space from a security point of view, which will also bring operational benefits as well. But it's an interesting one because you don't necessarily just want to deploy more technology to try and simplify everything. So this is an interesting challenge, and I think this is going to be a core area, and indeed something we're talking to customers about a lot, because Microsoft security is now at the heart of everything. And I'll touch on this a little bit, but one of the big announcements in the last few months has been Entra, Microsoft Entra and the Service Edge, the ability to do things like internet access, private access. This is a massive step change. This is a whole new area that Microsoft are starting to help deploy standardized, extremely capable security solutions for all of their clients. And out of the gates, for many organizations we're talking to, it's a minimum viable product, if you like, already, which for a disruptor is pretty impressive. We've got, I think, I was chatting with Matt earlier, we've got 4 deployments actively underway, people looking to get this moving. So this is definitely one of the big ones. For years, I talked about the fact that the Service Edge is the new model of security, and I'll touch on this at the end as well. So, biggest change in the last 12 months. If we go back to September last year, no one had even heard of this. OpenAI, ChatGPT wasn't even a thing. So I'm going to risk some audience participation now, so bear with. Right, can I have a show of hands? Who has used ChatGPT? Okay, so that's pretty much everyone. Keep your hands up if you've actually used the output in your job. Okay, so that's pretty fascinating, isn't it? This is something that is ultimately brand new technology that for a lot of organizations, there is no corporate strategy around this as such yet, but people have started using it and using it a lot, potentially. This is an area that we are doing a ton of work, as you would expect with our customers already. And it's something that I think is effectively, I'm old enough to remember when the internet and Google search arrived. I'm old enough to be, I was an analyst programmer, and I had to queue up to use the internet computer in the corner of the room. And this was in a major global bank, by the way. It was literally a dial-up machine in the corner of the room. But that moment changed the way that I worked. Knowledge was now not something that was acquired carefully over time, curated in your own head, and then it was really about where did you go to find the answer if you didn't have it, i.e. a textbook or a colleague. It suddenly became, how can you construct queries to go and search and gain that knowledge much more quickly? That was a hyperscaler moment for me, and it almost felt like cheating to start off with. And I think I had that same buzz when I first used the output from ChatGPT to complete what was actually a job spec for someone. It was almost perfectly crafted. I only had to tweak it. It was like, I felt like I was cheating. But the truth is, that's what everybody is going to start to do. They're going to start to use this tool as a hyperscaler. And Microsoft clearly are at the forefront of this. And so the world of Copilot is really a massive explosive area that we're starting to just see the green shoots of what's capable. And clearly, the event the other week with Microsoft, we talked about pretty much nothing else, but it's a fascinating moment. We've got Copilot for M365. I think it arrives today, someone mentioned. Yeah. That totally transforms the way you will potentially use ChatGPT, OpenAI, the ability to use generative AI in your workflow, because M365 is the tool set that you use in your day-to-day work. We'll talk about Copilot for security. There's Copilot for many other things, Copilot for GitHub, Copilot, et cetera, for sales, I've heard mentioned. All of these various Copilots are clearly designed for a specific process in mind. They are hyperscalers. They are the ability for staff to just get more stuff done. This is a massive moment. We're going to talk a bit about how we're starting to use it ourselves. This is a really big moment in the market. And like I say, it feels like this was where we were maybe 20 odd years ago, maybe 30, getting older, in terms of when Google arrived and search arrived on the internet for the first time. So I find it interesting to talk about how Microsoft are increasingly at the heart of IT strategy. This is the kind of traditional view of the world when we were talking about Microsoft not that long ago. We had a bit of M365, the Office and the collaboration tool sets and everything sat in that stack, including the first endpoint management solutions, so Intune obviously in there. And then we had Microsoft Azure, the ability to actually take your on-prem infrastructure and move it across into cloud compute. And generally, you could access that from anywhere. There was the internet in the middle. We've always talked about the fact mobile endpoints were kind of a bit of a signpost because they were internet endpoints by default. When they came out of the box, they didn't work if you stuck them on a private network, so they forced you to rethink the way you did this. And for many organizations, the ability to just activate endpoints, connect them into M365, this is a very effective business model in its own right. But there's so much more now, because actually, when we talk about the service edge, increasingly what we're talking about is the fact that there is no private network. Your offices will continue to need infrastructure in them. You'll need to provide connectivity, you'll have wireless, you'll probably have printers for the people who still want to do that kind of thing. And you know, all of this will still be there, but fundamentally, it's just about getting out, getting connected. And then the rest will happen magically in the background. This is the service edge. This is the zero trust model. This is all of this capability. And because Microsoft have now built out this entire ecosystem that sits around all of this, that is a security and management stack. So Entra, the ability to control identity, the ability to control governance to identity, appropriate access at all times, appropriate access to data, the ability to use Entra Private Access, Entra for the service edge. That's kind of your front door to everything going forwards. And the ability to then monitor that across all the various flavors of endpoint, back-end cloud services, etc. You've got Defender Stack in there. You need to be able to have a security operations team who can actually make sense of all this data. So Sentinel is the tool that will collate all of the information from all these various places and enable your teams to actually see patterns in that data and respond to incidents much more effectively. But probably the big one, and there is more here, by the way, you've got Purview and Preva, etc. when it comes to the data side, but fundamentally, Copilot sits in that stack too. It wraps around all of this. All of these technologies become hyperscaled by the ability to use Copilot as part of them. Because the Microsoft vision for the future is brilliant in many ways, because ultimately what they're describing is them sitting in front of everything. My God, someone was so surprised. Fantastic. Hope we got that on video. So yeah, you've got Microsoft sitting in front of everything. So you may well have a multi-cloud strategy, but ultimately you're going to gain access to those other clouds by using the Microsoft cloud first. They're going to sit there in front, whether it's your SaaS solutions or whether your multi-cloud infrastructure as a service, whatever it may be, AWS, Google Cloud, etc. And I think for us, this is a wonderful moment, being honest. This is what, again, Shane mentioned, you know, the coming together and why we joined the Kocho brand and company is because this is the future stack. And this is where our expertise is. This is what we can do for customers. And I'm delighted that, you know, we've got the opportunity to talk to you more in detail about a lot of this stuff today. And clearly, it's not all about Microsoft, but there's a lot of Microsoft here. But it's great that we're actually joined also by some of our partners who help bring and augment this technology stack with extra capabilities that everybody's going to need. So I think in summary, look, you know, a lot has happened in the last year, clearly. I think, you know, the world is feeling a pretty different place, it has to be said. But in the technology space, we've seen some really big trends start to emerge. And clearly, you know, you can't come to an event without talking about AI. Generative AI in particular is having its real moment, it has to be said. Microsoft are going to be increasingly at the heart of everything. They always were, let's be honest. This is their future strategy. And the beauty is that they're taking everybody on the journey and they're raising the water level for everyone in the process. And there is real hyperscaler capability that also comes from the fact that your environment is much more like everybody else's, which is a great way to transfer skills for us as service providers to give standard services that sit on top of it. And look, hey, this is ultimately what we're about. We're here to help you with all of this. So look, I appreciate your time. I'm back here to summarize the outputs later today. But yeah, enjoy the day, and I'll catch up with you soon.